Marketer of the Day, number 415. Conviction, customization, and clarity. Break out of your comfort zone with Andy Molinsky. Hey everyone, and thanks for listening. We're talking right now with Andy Molinsky, and Andy is a professor of organizational behavior and psychology at Brandeis University's International Business School, and he's an expert on organizational behavior, on cross-cultural interaction in business settings, in self-help, and in improvement. And he has a new book out called Reach, a new strategy to help you step outside your comfort zone to rise to the challenge and build confidence. So we're going to talk about lots of stuff today about your mind and getting the most out of your productivity and your feelings and all that fun stuff. So how are things today, Mr. Andy?
Things are great. Thanks for having me on.
I'm glad to have you. And so yeah, can you kind of tell us about yourself and what you have going on lately?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a professor at Brandeis University at the International Business School and also in the psychology department. So I've got that background of business and psychology. And I also am a writer. I write for Harvard Business Review, for Inc.com, for Psychology Today, and I've written two business books, Global Dexterity, about acting outside your cultural comfort zone, and then my new book Reach, which you mentioned before, which is about acting outside your comfort zone, in work and everyday life. And I work with companies and do consulting and speaking and so on. And so that's a bit about me.
Okay, great. And I love this idea. I love this topic, getting outside your comfort zone, because a lot of the people who are like my people, my audience, we have a lot of solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, work at home kind of people. And it seems like sometimes I'll go and I'll reach out to them and I'll be like, how can I help you? Where are you stuck? And it seems like a lot of the people that write back, there's this one group that writes back, and there's a lot of maybe people who are maybe like between like 50 and 65 years or so, and they feel like they've played it safe for quite a while, and they feel like they're unhappy where they're at now, and they want to do more, but it's like there's the problem in getting from point A to point B and getting outside their comfort zone. So just to give you kind of like a little bit of a feel of like who's listening. And this is the kind of thing that I'm always curious about, because like I used to have a day job, and now I'm a full-time entrepreneur, and it seems like over and over again there are times when I know I should like push myself and get myself out there, but sometimes I feel like I do only maybe 80% of what I'm capable of, and then I feel later on that like, oh yeah, looking at that situation in hindsight, I should have just gone for it. And so am I weird? Am I with the same way that a lot of people are? I mean, what's the usual situation you see with this whole comfort zone stuff?
Yeah, I think it's very different for everybody. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on your personality, it depends on your stage in life, it depends on your tolerance for discomfort, and it depends a lot on the situation we're talking about. So in my book, Reach, for example, I spoke with small business owners, entrepreneurs. I also spoke with managers, doctors, police officers, actors, students, priests, rabbis, even a goat farmer. And I did a lot of research trying to understand what holds people back, what the challenges are, what the pain points are to stepping outside your comfort zone, in all sorts of situations, how people avoid it, and what you can do to be more successful. And in the situations that people talked about, were really varied. So it might be that for some people it was public speaking. For other people it was sales. For other people it was networking. Some people it was making small talk with people they don't know. So people really honed in on specific situations that were critical for them to kind of grow and develop in their career, maybe pivot, whatever it might be. And that's what the book's about. It's about helping, in my work in general too, is about helping people learn to step outside their comfort zone in these situations and understand what's holding them back.
Okay, great. So everyone's different. Everyone has their own sort of personality or roadblocks or specific things that they want to accomplish. And so with all this mess in front of us, where's the starting point? If someone says, I know that I need to go for it more, I need to be more confident, what's the first step in figuring all that out?
Yeah, for me, and so the first step for me, and this is I also do coaching and training and workshops, and I'm starting an online course in January helping people step outside their comfort zone more successfully. And so the first step, I think, is understanding what's holding you back. Understanding the term people often use is your pain point. And what I identify in my book and what I talk about is 5 different core challenges that you can experience, and that can hold you back when stepping outside your comfort zone. You might not experience all of these, but even one of them can make it hard. So the first is authenticity, the idea that you're worried that in stepping outside your comfort zone, you won't feel like yourself. Like this you'll feel like an imposter, like you won't feel like yourself. Another one's likability, which is different from authenticity. That's the concern that people won't like this version of you. They might even hate this version of you. Maybe for you, stepping outside your comfort zone is becoming more assertive with someone. And what if people don't like that, or delivering bad news, or whatever it might be. Competence is another pain point. So you got authenticity, you got likability, you got competence. The fear that you look like a fool doing whatever it might be. Using social media, putting yourself out there, giving a speech. That you will look foolish and you'll feel foolish. That's the third one. The fourth one's resentment. The feeling that you feel resentful that deep down that you have to do this in the first place. Maybe logically you understand you need to do it, but kind of deep down psychologically you feel resentful and frustrated that you have to do it. I hear that a lot from people who are maybe more introverted and get very frustrated that it seems that the key to success is to be able to schmooze with the boss and make connections and talk about last night's game or last night's TV program or whatever it is. And for them, it's really hard to do that with someone they don't know, maybe someone who's kind of above them in the hierarchy, and they get resentful that it can't just be their skills and talents that enable them to succeed, but it's these things outside their comfort zone. So that's resentment. People can feel resentful. And then finally, morality. You might not hear this in the crowd that we're talking with and about, but sometimes stepping outside your comfort zone on some level can feel wrong. But I actually opened my book Reach with the story of a young woman who left the corporate world to become an entrepreneur, created a small startup. And very soon after creating the startup, she realized she was going to have to fire her best friend from the startup. And she felt a real threat to her morality. So you got authenticity, you got likability, you got competence, you got resentment, you got morality, and really any one of these, anticipating it, feeling it, can really block you from taking that leap outside your comfort zone.
Okay, great. So just to make sure everyone has those 5 pain points, you talked about authenticity, likability, competence, resentment, and morality. And so what is someone to do with that information? Do they look at this list and say, like, what's the one out of the bunch that is the reason why I won't do this? Or once someone has this list of these 5 pain points, then what's the action to be taken to start to make some changes here?
Well, I think the very act of diagnosing them and being aware of them is a step, right? So having awareness. I think a lot of times people, when they're considering stepping outside their comfort zones, aren't so clear about why they're scared, or aren't so clear about what's holding them back, aren't so clear about what their pain points are. They might just feel kind of generally afraid, let's say. But when you can start to have language to talk about it, it's actually it's actually powerful. It gives you a bit more insight and control. So that's the first thing. But in terms of actual concrete steps, what I found so as I told you, all the different types of people that I researched, and I also have taught an MBA class in a business school for many years. I created it where I help students, MBA students, so usually in their 20s or early 30s, step outside their comfort zones in situations that matter to them. And so what I find is that what distinguishes people who are successful from people who are unsuccessful are essentially able to do 3 things. And these are the 3 tools that I talk about in the book. The first is conviction. They're able to do them, or they have them. So, or they're able to discover them. So conviction is that sort of deep sense of purpose. So, if you reflect, why are you interested in this situation, stepping outside your comfort zone? Is this the right thing for you to do? Is it the necessary thing? Will it make you feel good about yourself? Will it enable you to help others? Is it something you've just always wanted to do? You have always dreamed about whatever it is, starting your own company, being an entrepreneur. And that can be the wind at your back when something really feels outside your comfort zone. And those are some professional reasons, but there's also personal reasons too. Sometimes I know for myself, when I'm encountering something outside my comfort zone. Whether it might, and I'm actually, a bit of an entrepreneur myself. Starting a little business here, helping others step outside their comfort zone. And whenever I get uncomfortable myself, what actually becomes my source of conviction is my kids. Like I have a 13 and an 11-year-old, and I'm always trying to coax them outside their comfort zones in an age appropriate way. And I think to myself, gosh, if I'm doing that for my kids, I got to really look in the mirror here, and make sure that I'm kind of living up to what I'm preaching. That's the kind of dad I want to be. And so whatever it is, for some people it's professional, for some people it's personal, for some people it's a combination. Find your source of conviction, embrace it, use it, because it's actually quite powerful in terms of helping you take that leap outside your comfort zone. So that's number one, conviction. Number two is what I call customization. And this was one of the most surprising and actually really exciting things I found in my work. And that's the idea that there's no one size fits all. So whatever it is that you're trying to do and stepping outside your comfort zone, you can make your own version of it. You can tweak it, almost like if you buy a pair of pants or if you buy a blouse or a dress or something and it doesn't quite fit you, you might bring it to a tailor to kind of tweak it to make it your own and really personalize it for you so that it fits. And metaphorically, that's what you can do with a situation outside your comfort zone. You can make your own version of it in a way. You can say, there are many tools to do that. It might be body language. Sometimes it's a prop, like an actual prop. I used to wear a ring every time I gave a public speech early in my career because I was so uncomfortable. And that ring actually had quite a bit of meaning to me. It actually was a stone, and that ring was found by my uncle in the South Pacific during World War II, and it just really it meant courage to me. And so that ring was a prop, and I used that prop to kind of customize my experience, and that really ended up helping me. Sometimes you might play with timing. So let's say you're uncomfortable going to a loud, noisy, intimidating networking event. Well, if you play with timing a bit and go at the very beginning of that networking event, it's probably going to be less noisy, less intimidating, less crowded. So my point here is that there are many, many things you can do, and you have more power than you think to customize your situation. And in the book and in my work, I really help people do that, and it's quite powerful, actually. The third and final tool that seemed to distinguish people who were successful was clarity. And clarity is basically the idea of not thinking of and overvaluing and over predicting the worst possible case scenario. I think when we're scared, when we're afraid of something outside our comfort zone, we do what psychologists call catastrophize. We think of the worst possible case scenario, almost like imagine like you're a boat in a stormy sea and you're going back and forth, kind of your emotional experience. What clarity is it's that anchor. It grounds you. So if you're afraid of public speaking, the fear would be maybe you're going to look like a total fool, maybe you're going to faint on stage, but instead you sort of capture that more realistic middle ground perspective. You probably won't be the best TED talker ever immediately, and you probably won't also faint on stage. You'll probably be somewhere in the middle. You'll have some moments and you'll have some areas that you need to work on, and but you'll learn a lot, and the next time you'll probably be even better. And that's sort of clarity, a grounded type of rational thinking that was also a very big aid to people in stepping outside their comfort zone.
Super amazing. So conviction, which means that we have that deep sense of purpose, customization, so that way you kind of have something to make it your own, like the ring. And the customization is kind of interesting because what that makes me realize as I'm thinking about things is I'm for some weird reason I'm more comfortable in like a large group and way less comfortable with a couple of people. So when you're explaining that, it made me kind of think of, when I'm in like a kind of networking situation, like if I'm in like a room where there's going to be like some kind of meeting and there's like, say like 20, 30 people there, and we're kind of like, everyone's just getting settled and things haven't really started yet. If I'm in like a new situation like that, I've noticed that I just kind of go and I make it a point to go and talk to people one-on-one, even though it's really unnatural, really uncomfortable for me. I just make it a point to go and talk to those people one-on-one, because like otherwise I'd just be kind of standing around by myself and not really sure what to do, and even more awkward with that. So it's almost like it's kind of paradoxical, but like the default kind of safe behavior of not breaking the comfort zone is just kind of makes me feel a little miserable. But then by breaking the comfort zone and going and talking to individual people, it's like, well, I can kind of pierce the comfort zone a little bit and feel a little uncomfortable, but then at the same time feel better about it. So it's like almost like by breaking the comfort zone, it's like I feel good and bad at the same time, as opposed to just feeling bad. Does that make sense, or is that totally crazy?
It makes sense. It's funny. It reminds me of a story that I heard recently. A reader of Reach of my book emailed me, and she was so excited about this idea of customization. And she said that it wasn't a networking situation; it was just more of like a social situation. And she said she was kind of shy, and she had a hard time. Connecting with people one-on-one and conversations just at a social get together, and it was too bad because she really wanted to meet people and so on. And so she had this epiphany that and this is an example of customization, that she happened to love photography, and so she just had this epiphany to bring a selfie stick to her next get together, and that's a prop, just like I talked about. And she said it was amazing because all of a sudden it totally catalyzed her experience. It totally changed it because people would come up to her and say, "What's that?" And then she'd say, "Oh, it's a selfie stick." Then say, "Oh yeah," like everyone knows. Most people, not everyone, most people know what a selfie stick is. They might not know what it looks like, but they know the idea of it. And they're like, "Oh, how do you use that?" And she would say, "Oh, okay, here, I'll show you." And it made her feel natural and authentic, and it broke the ice, and it absolutely transformed the experience. So that your story reminded me of that.
That's great. So have that icebreaker to kind of get things rolling. So conviction, customization, and clarity. And I'm looking at the table of contents of your book a little bit. And after talking about the three C's there of how to reach outside your comfort zone, you have a chapter there about the surprising benefits of taking a leap. So I don't want to get all the secrets from your book from you, but what the heck are some of these benefits of taking a leap? Because now you got my curiosity going.
Well, this is what I think is interesting about comfort zones. If you do Google image on comfort zone or getting out of your comfort zone, you're going to get a lot of inspirational messages. Sort of like the kinds of things you might see, like remember the TV show The Office, and maybe, or like these like posters, like these sort of motivational posters on the walls and stuff, like people jumping off cliffs, or maybe saying like nothing good ever happened in a comfort zone, and so on and so forth. Like basically the internet is telling you, take a leap, take a leap, take a leap, that you just got to take a leap. And what I find, as you can tell, is that it's not as simple as that, but taking a leap is really important. So it's just a little bit more challenging than is portrayed on the internet, and using the tools that we just talked about, it's doable. And so the reason, though, and this gets to your question, the reason why taking a leap is so important is because when you take a leap, when you try something, that's where learning can happen, right? You're never going to be able to learn if you don't actually try it. It sounds simple, but it's actually quite profound. The question, of course, is what enables you to try it, what enables you to nudge yourself to take the leap, and that's what we talked about. But once you take a leap, you can have these surprising discoveries. And the two main ones that people just continually tell me are, number one, this isn't as hard as I thought it was, and number two, I'm a little bit better at this than I thought I was. And if you think about it, those are really powerful discoveries about yourself, in the situation, about your capabilities, about your self-efficacy. But you're never going to make those statements. You're never going to feel those things unless you actually take that leap. But taking a leap isn't as easy as you're not going to say, "Oh, I'm terrified of X," and then just say, "Oh yeah, okay, I'm going to go do it." Maybe a few people do that, but most people don't. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and that's what my book's about, enabling you to take the leap.
And so, what are these benefits of taking the leap? Like after some of these people, they've used your tools, they've broken through to the other side. What are some of the things that they've told you that have happened?
Well, that's the key. What you're doing is you're avoiding the cycle. You're getting out of a cycle of avoidance. So without taking a leap, without using the tools that we talked about, what you end up doing, what most of us do, is we'll end up avoiding, and we'll avoid the situation, or we'll rationalize why it's not so important for us to do the situation, or whatever it might be. And when you avoid something, of course, you get a little short-term boost of relief, right? Oh, like, phew, I don't have to do that, right? But over time, it just makes that thing, whatever it is, much harder over time. And so you avoid and you avoid more, and then it becomes even more taboo and more difficult, and you avoid even more. So you're in this vicious cycle of avoidance. And what the tools that we talked about before enable you to do is they enable you to take that leap, have those self-discoveries. In other words, whoa, I can do this. And, it's not as hard as I thought. And that will nudge you closer to trying it again instead of avoiding. So it's basically like it creates a different cycle, more of a virtuous cycle, where you're nudging yourself to take a leap. You take a leap, you have some self-discovery about yourself, and then that encourages you to try it again. So it's you get on an absolute different trajectory and spiral, and people come out of it more confident. People come out of it really sort of discovering capabilities that they didn't realize they had. So those are the kinds of things, really kind of improving, enriching their lives. And, on some level, I know it sounds grandiose, but kind of nudging closer to the life that they want to lead in some ways.
I love it. So it's not just one and done. It's setting up these new patterns. It's making sort of a butterfly effect.
Absolutely.
Super cool. And so, if people are listening to our conversation today and they're saying, I want to get outside my comfort zone. And as you said, just the fact that people are looking for the solution to this problem means that they're already kind of somewhat on the path of getting this problem fixed. Do you have any interesting or quick exercises or things people can do in just a couple of minutes today to start getting on the right path?
Yeah, I think one good thing to do would be to think of your sort of worst case scenario, like think about a situation, like choose a situation that you want to think about. Maybe it's making small talk. Maybe it's, confronting that coworker. Maybe it's maybe it's stepping up and networking, or deciding that you are going to sell whatever it is that you're considering selling, but that you're afraid to do it. Whatever it might be, whatever your situation is, your pain point, so to speak. I think it's useful to take a piece of paper, jot down your worst case version of the situation. Like, what's your greatest fear in this situation? Then write down what the ideal, like perfect version, if it were the absolute perfect version. And then after that, write down what the most realistic version is, and sort of just describe that. And then try to place a probability on each of these three. Like, how probable is the worst case, 0 to 100? How probable is the absolute best case? And how probable is the most realistic case? Of course, I'm kind of like, weighting it there in terms of calling it the most realistic. But I think what most people find is when they're honest with themselves, they realize that the probability of the most realistic, that middle ground approach, is much higher. And just even the act of doing that quick little task, I think, starts to open your eyes to possibilities.
Yeah, that's great. And that's a way to flesh out what you're actually thinking, because I think that, when I think about some kind of exiting a comfort zone situation in the future, or something I want to do, but then I talk myself out of it, or if I deal with a coaching client or something, it's always that worst case scenario there is always just something like really just exaggerated just to kind of prove the point, right? And the ideal situation is also exaggerated just because it's like, well, this is what would happen if like my dreams came true and everything happened. And then so you list out that worst case scenario, which is an exaggeration, ideal version, which is also an exaggeration, and then realistic. And now that you've at this point you've thought about it like now 3 different times, and then putting the probability on it is even better, because now it's like, okay, I've thought about this from a couple different angles, a couple different times, and I've thought about the things that I kind of knee-jerk reaction just said, like, the most craziest thing. But then by having worst case, then ideal, then realistic, and then putting those percentages on it, I imagine that when people do this exercise, I imagine that the worst case and the ideal get super low percentages, and the realistic gets a high percentage. Is that a good guess?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that starts to make people realize, it sort of kind of demystifies things for them.
Yeah, that's cool. So then by trying to crack this huge nut of, overconfidence, self-esteem, the fear of the breaking the comfort zone, instead of trying to crack this huge problem, they're breaking it down into manageable pieces in the same way they break down the pain point and all that fun stuff. So I love it. I love this idea. And so as we're running this conversation down, I'm curious, like, what led you to doing this? Like, did you yourself have a issue with leaving your comfort zone, or when you were doing your psychological stuff, did you see people with this problem, or like what led you to kind of being on this mission, having this message?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'd say there are a couple of things. The first thing is that I have always struggled outside my comfort zone. I mean, always. I could start earlier, but I'll start in college. I was the kid in the back of the class, terrified of speaking up, and I would consider speaking, but my heart would race. It would feel like it's beating out of my chest. My face would turn red. I would start to maybe consider saying something and then put my hand down. And then after college, same thing with networking. I remember my first job. As I mentioned earlier, alluded to, I was really, really uncomfortable with public speaking, which is hard if you're a professor, right? But 20 years in now, I've really overcome a lot of these things. I give keynotes a lot. I speak in companies. I did a TED Talk. I've done a lot of stuff, and so I feel actually quite confident now. But I've overcome a lot, and so I've been very self-aware about it. The other piece here is that my first book, which was in 2013, it's called Global Dexterity, about adapting behavior across cultures. I lived and worked abroad a couple of times. And so that book was about acting outside your cultural comfort zone. And I actually got some really interesting feedback a couple of years ago from multiple people saying that the ideas in the book weren't just applicable to crossing national cultures, but this idea of comfort zones is a real universal phenomenon. I then took that and I wrote kind of like a trial balloon article in Harvard Business Review, and maybe 3-4 years ago, and it got a lot of feedback. And I thought to myself, man, this is really touching a point, for a lot of people. And so, and then of course I reflected on myself. I was like, wait a second, I've always struggled with this, and that really kind of catalyzed it, and kind of pushed me forward to the book.
Great. So one thing built on another, and then you had like the feedback and all that fun stuff. And so, do you have a number one secret, or if you could, tell that scared person of yourself back in high school or college, if you can like tell yourself one thing, do you know what that would be, or does anything come to mind?
I think probably what's the worst that could happen, and then how likely is that? I mean, if you're really gonna sort of boil it down to one thing. I think that's and the other thing would be, what, if you try this, you are probably going to surprise yourself. I would say
love it.
those two things.
Or those three things, right? Number one, what's the worst that can happen? Number two, how likely is it? And then number three, if you do it, you're likely going to surprise yourself. So I mean, great. We got a 3-in-1 answer there. So great stuff. And I want to make sure that everyone knows how to get this book, which sounds amazing, and they know where to find you and your website. So can you tell us, if someone listened to this conversation, which I guess if they did, because now they're at this point in the podcast. So do you have any like books and websites to recommend for people?
Yeah, definitely. So I love to connect with people. I have a website, which is www.andymolinsky.com, ANDYMOLINSKY.com. I have lots of free articles and videos and quizzes and all sorts of stuff. I basically built a website that I would want to visit. So there's also links to my books, and also to my social media. I have a newsletter where I give some of my best tips, just periodically to listeners and people interested. And so I'm very active on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. And so I'd love to connect, and please reach out.
Super great. Well, everyone listening, be sure to do that. Reach out by going to andymolinsky.com. Go there and subscribe to him and check out his free resources. And if you're the kind of person where you go there and you say, I'm not really sure what to do, then make sure to go and get that book. Or if you're the kind of person where you go to his website, you go and get some tips, and you say, well, I'm about to click the X button and leave, I'm about to go and get distracted by something else. Well, while you're on your way out, make sure to get a copy of his book, Reach. It's on Kindle, it's on Audible, it's on Amazon. Make sure that you get a copy. That way you always have this resource to go back to make sure that you're stepping outside your comfort zone, or if you're having these difficulties, which we all have difficulties at one point or another, as far as getting out there and doing what we need to do and overcoming the stupid stuff that kind of gets in our head, but it is there in our head regardless. So we need these tools to break through and do the things we need to do for our own greatness. So make sure to go to andymolinsky.com and get that book Reach. That way you always have this resource whenever you need it. So thanks, Mr. Andy, for stopping by and sharing with us some really cool stories, some really cool lists and tools and just interesting stuff to think about, to chew on, so that we can live our best lives and have the most fun and always be satisfied and be able to look back and say, dang, I wish I took the risk. I'm glad that I did all those things. I'm glad that I lived that very life, as opposed to just playing it safe, avoiding it, feeling okay now, being miserable later. Nobody wants that. It's more fun to get out there and take some risks and have fun. So thanks for coming by, and thanks for sharing this great message that everyone needs to hear. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. It was a fun conversation, and I really hope listeners will reach out.
I think they will. So thanks for that. And once again, for you guys to do that reaching out, go to andymolinsky.com. And thanks, Andy, and we'll talk to everyone soon. This is Robert Plank. And would you like to be a guest on the program? Do you have an idea for a future episode, or do you just want to tell us how we're doing? Get in touch with us right now at marketeroftheday.com/ask to let us know.